Hello and welcome to Premier Study in Investing. It's great to have you. Thanks for stopping by.
Okay, so this is a follow-up video to one I made 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, we basically looked at some of the cash positions, some of the floors, you could say, based on the fundamental analysis of the debt level, the assets per share, and the cash per share that Moderna had. We also looked at what we thought some of the analysts were expecting as far as revenue for 2024, the rest of this year, and then 2025. We looked at some of their cash burn rates, and we toyed with some options as far as how long could they kind of hang on if they were to have any of their products pulled, like we saw happen with Johnson & Johnson and some other vaccines related to pandemic. So almost all of the revenue that Moderna is making is off their Spikevax global, whether that's for adolescents, young children, or adults. On November 7th, there was a surprise beat, 3 cents positive, with the estimate of negative $1.80. So 101% surprise. Now, since then, we've had a lot of volume, obviously. We came and sort of touched, and it looks like this support line readjusted to the new low that we set here. And so now the price has come up above our support area. And one of the questions is just going to be looking at dollars. And now we're up at 42. What's changed? Why all this volume? And I think it's mostly to do with a investor report that was given at Jefferies conference. So let's look at that next. But before we do, I'll quickly make a note that the cash per share has now been updated to $17.84. 2 weeks ago, it was listed from the previous quarter at $22. So it's come down, and we're using that as a fundamental valuation for the company, that it must be at least worth the cash on hand minus about $3 of debt. So maybe it's worth like $14, you could say. Book value per share actually went up slightly, about 50 cents per share. So let's go and look at this article from Investopedia. We read November 22nd, 2024, so after the earnings report and during some of this high volatility, high volume trading days. Moderna stock jumps following bullish sales view at healthcare conference. And this was some statements made by Moderna's head of investor relations, Lavina Talukdar, at a Jefferies London healthcare conference. So they're basically expecting it in 2024 with $9 billion in cash, and they anticipate that $9 billion of cash will be able to allow them to launch 10 new products between now and 2028. So over the next 3 years is what they said actually. They kind of downplayed what they thought of Robert Kennedy. They thought that he was, what would you expect them to say? That, he's a big bark, small bite kind of dog, right? That's maybe how you could expect. I mean, how else are you going to play that as a PR person? The market sold off huge on the announcement that he was going to be put into a government office. They're talking about the surprise profit that came in Q3, and they said that was basically because they estimated a third quarter following the launch earlier this year of its updated COVID-19 vaccine. So it's just a booster. That's not the next gen thing that they're working on that's still in development, but they were able to get the approval a little bit earlier this fall, and so they had some of the money come in earlier in Q3 instead of Q4. Now, what that kind of means, from what other people have written, I thought it was great insight, was if we will see this, but if full year 2024 guidance is expected to stay the same as it was, so still flat, no improvement in full year revenue, and if you had a big surprise in Q3, what must that say about Q4? It must mean that Q4 is going to be a disappointment. So look at that here in a second and kind of fill in the color in between the lines on that statement. So, which I can do here. This is the Moderna reports third quarter 2024 financial report results. So this is November 7th, the third quarter report, and actually downloaded it, allowed me to make some notes and do some highlighting. And so what we'll see here is it achieves year-to-date Product sales of 2.2 billion. They are reiterating the 2024 expectation of product sales of 3 to 3.5 billion. So if they're reiterating the 2024 full year, then it's got to be, if you had a great third quarter with a surprise beat, profit instead of a loss, then obviously Q4 is not going to be so hot. But I really want to try to look at just some other easy pieces before we get deep in the weeds. So Q3 expected loss of $1.93 again, and they pulled out a profit of 3 cents. It's really interesting in this report that we're going to look at, I guess just going back, a lot of the comments. So if I kind of switch back over to this third quarter investor report, a lot of the comments could be made by comparing September 30th of 2023 to September 30th of this year. So Q3 this year compared to Q3 last year is another way to say it. Well, they had huge write-downs in Q3 of 2023, $1.3 billion in inventory write-downs. And so here you can see even Q3 2023 earnings call transcript. Moderna Incorporated missed on earnings expectation. They reported earnings per share of negative $9.53 EPS when they were expected to lose only $1.81. So what they basically did is they took all of the write-downs from that year and they dumped them all into third quarter. The other thing to make note of is 2 weeks ago, before the earnings report, we had our analyst at the high end at $238. Now we're at $212, so they lowered their expectation. And then $46 was the lowest of the low estimates from the analysts that cover this. And now the new low is $31. So it went from 46 down to 31. We can look at some of the top analysts. Some holds, some underweight, some buys. 139 from Goldman, 111, 69, 75, 59, 55, 110, and 80 from Deutsche. So an interesting mix. So in my last video, I argued that you needed to have a strong case made by the scientific community if you were going to follow the lead of Joseph, I think, Ladapo out of Florida, the Surgeon General in Florida, who called for a halt of mRNA shots in the state of Florida due to some contamination issues that a lot of people have covered. Well, if you're going to do that, you're also going to need the political will behind it. And so we had a huge change of politicians, or we're expecting to, in early 2025 when everyone is put in. But let's take a look at Trump's picks for the CDC, the FDA, and the Surgeon General. This is from November 23rd, NPR article. So we have a surgeon from Johns Hopkins, Marty Makary, is the choice for the Food and Drug Administration commissioner. Former Republican Dave Weldon, a Republican from Florida, to serve as the director of the CDC. Wow. And then Jeanette Nesheiwat. Sorry, Jeanette, if that's mispronouncing your name. A Fox News contributor. She's more than that, obviously, and is in line to be the next Surgeon General. So I wanted to try to find some information on these people. Obviously, it's going to be biased depending upon the news source, but I guess we could try to factor that in. So this coming from ABC. Trump picks Johns Hopkins surgeon who argued against COVID lockdowns to lead the FDA. And generally, I'm not sure how much of a force this guy is going to play. He's obviously an important role, but he's really, I think, could easily get sucked into some of these other issues like food and food quality and food ingredients. It looks like he will work under the leadership of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to evaluate harmful chemicals poisoning our nation's food supply and drugs and biologics given to our nation's youth so that we can finally address the childhood chronic disease epidemic. Okay, that was a statement from Trump in his announcement. It says he's a respected transplant surgeon who questioned his colleagues' recommendations on COVID. And what recommendations were those? It says that he questioned the value of lockdowns and masks for children. He supported the use of vaccines, but opposed mandates and doubted the utility of boosters, at odds with full-throated recommendations on boosters from the CDC. Among his views was that the U.S. government was underestimating the number of people who are likely immune to the virus. Early in 2021, he predicted much of the country would reach herd immunity by that April, reducing the risks of the virus dramatically. And ABC makes an argument that he got that one wrong. Though some people would say, no, he got that right. So, like I said, you have to sort through the news and where we're getting it from. But he was, I guess, a proponent of natural immunity, and that was still being underestimated by the U.S. government. One important thing that we'll see in one of these later financial documents from Moderna is that 2/3 of their sales are occurring in America. So 2/3 of their customers are Americans. So that's why this is sort of important if you're going to analyze their stock price and their sales. Then they go on. He sounded a lot like RFK Jr. when talking about poison food supply, pesticides, and ultra-processed foods. It's great, but it just doesn't have much to do with the mRNA technology. So Makary praises Trump's decision to pick Kennedy, and he said he wants, so he would be Kennedy, I suppose, he wants to address corruption in healthcare and corruption in our government health agencies. And then he warns against drugging our nation's children. It's not clear what he would do if he was confirmed as the FDA commissioner. Okay, so that's one article about Makary. Let's switch over. Here, this is from NBC News, November 25th. This is a look at this gentleman, Dave Weldon. Trump's CDC pick could bolster an RFK Jr. anti-vaccine agenda, is what NBC News has for us as far as the headline. It does seem, based on this article, that it kind of falls in line with what they're claiming here in the subtitle. Served 14 years in Congress. He was an outspoken critic of the CDC and its vaccine program. I'll just read this one sentence. Weldon served 14 years in Congress representing the 15th District of Florida, where he was an outspoken critic of the Public Health Agency and its vaccine program. They're saying that this gentleman made a false claim about a preservative used in vaccines, and that preservative is linked to autism. Anyway, so this guy could be a handful. He could be a real problem for the Moderna pipeline. It seems like he has a long track record. He's outspoken. Now, is NBC just trying to color this guy in a bad light because they don't like Republicans? I guess that's possible and something we could take into account. But also, we don't want to read 20, 30, 40 different articles when all we really want to do is get some idea of who these people are. All right, MAGA turns on Trump Surgeon General pick for once calling COVID vaccine, quote unquote, a gift from God. And then they're saying, we didn't vote for this. So this is November 25th from Daily Dot, Catherine Higgins. So we're talking about Dr. Jeanette Nesheiwat, New York-based medical director and a regular on Fox News. But they say her pro-vaccine and pro-masking takes during the pandemic have left the COVID-19 deniers outraged. So I don't know if I like the COVID-19 deniers, but it's so interesting in journalism how the vitriol and the two sides that they want to push everybody in with this extreme language. But apparently pro-vaccine, pro-mask, and they're arguing that that's not what Republicans wanted. Quote, that will actually save you from dying as a gift from God. So looks like she was supportive of Facebook combating anti-vaccine misinformation, and she spoke about her endorsement of masking to prevent the virus from spreading. Well, I don't know. A lot of people didn't know that the masks were ineffective back then. And, everybody I think is against misinformation. It's just that who gets to decide what's misinformation and what's not? What if things aren't clear? What conversations, debates, or topics are not even allowed for discussion? I mean, that's sort of the problem with the misinformation issue. Of course, nobody wants misinformation, but I think most of us would also agree it's maybe a messy process of getting to the truth on things that we don't know about from the get-go. And so this is kind of interesting because it brings in a tweet from Liz Wheeler about both Jeanette Nesheiwat and Dr. Joseph Ladapo. Dr. Joseph Ladapo is the currently standing Surgeon General of the state of Florida, and he wrote a paper in, I think, January 3rd or February 3rd of 2024, calling for the halt of mRNA shots in Florida because of some findings we've discussed before and actually gotten strikes for, so I'm not going to say too much about that, but it had to do with the quality and some of the things that were in the vaccine material. I guess you could say that. Anyway, so this Liz Wheeler person says Dr. Jeanette Nesheiwat bashes Dr. Joseph Ladapo because Ladapo followed scientific evidence that masks don't work. Nesheiwat should withdraw, she wrote. She's not a leader, she's a sheep. She mindlessly parroted the quote-unquote experts' COVID tyranny. Actual leadership is Ladapo. And then she says, I guess, masks have saved thousands of lives and prevented thousands of infections. It's not necessarily a comment related to COVID. I mean, could be true. Maybe it's true. Flu. I don't know. So I don't want to put too much in there, but that gives you some flavor for what people are saying about these individuals and perhaps who they are to a degree and where they stand. I wasn't so clear about, what the Surgeon General's exact role is, but this is from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Surgeon General brings the best available scientific information to the public by issuing Surgeon General's advisories, calls to actions, reports on critical issues, and communicating directly with the public via a number of communication channels. The Surgeon General is, one, nominated by the President of the United States and confirmed by the U.S. Senate, serves a 4-year term of office, is part of the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Health in the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. I guess before we go in and look at the financials, it'd be good to pause and ask ourselves, is that enough? I made the argument last time that we need a strong push of evidence from the scientific community, which I think we have. I really do think we have that. But it also needs to be married to a political will. Some individuals that are very strong, willing to take a lot of flack and probably, personal threats and all kinds of slander in order to push forward the idea that mRNA tech is not suitable, I guess you could say. Do you have that in those three people? I would say not with the Surgeon General. She seems like a nice person who was kind of on board with what everyone else was saying. Do the masks, mask the kids, hooray for this new breakthrough. And it's just weird, it's hard to judge them outside of time because no one knew in 2021 what we know now in 2024. And so how many people could, be put on record or at some point in their lives saying, I guess, let's wear the mask. I guess let's stay inside. Let's do the social distancing and all that stuff. I mean, the internet never forgets. Isn't that what they say? Well, anyways, let's look at this third quarter financial report. And what I'm going to basically try to hash out here is whether or not the statements that were made at this Jeffries conference that were alluded to in this Investopedia article during a few days where we had huge moves to the upside on the share price, and I couldn't really see anything else that was really going on. Otherwise, that would have been really new news that would suggest that the shares should go up, 7%, 11% intraday, things like that. Besides really this November 22nd healthcare conference hosted by Jefferies that we already looked at. And I'm going to kind of say that, well, we're going to look. Let's just look. I don't need to create a narrative here. Let's just look together. So I don't really need to say it again, but we'll just say quickly, there was a surprise earnings beat in Q3 2024. And so that relates to this document. We already talked about that they're reiterating full year 2024 sales to be flat. That's why we'd say reiterate. It's not any more improved. And so if Q3 was great, Q4 might be a dud. One thing I wanted to say was if you're looking at doing call or put options on this, you typically, as a rule of thumb, want to have your expiration date 1 month beyond any big news date. So a news date or an event would be the Q4 2024 earnings report that's going to come out February 20th. So that might mean if you tack on, an extra month, maybe March 20th, calls or puts that would be expiring would still capture that Q4 earnings report and leave you enough time where you don't get killed by the theta decay. This is the time decay that happens more so on calls than on puts, but the theta decay is a big thing where if you're out of the money with 30 days to go, the value of the contracts really declines sharply. Learn that in CFA program, CFA level 1. It's a good program. Let's go back. All right, so the company reported $1.8 billion in Spikevax sales during third quarter 2024. It's $1.2 billion sold in the U.S. and $600 million internationally. That works out to be 2/3 of their sales are happening in the United States. So that's why we're focusing on U.S. policy and U.S. policymakers. Recent recommendation of the CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices of additional doses for older adults and high-risk populations is supportive of vaccine uptake. Okay, so there's a bullish statement. RSV came in about $10 million in third quarter 2024, and so $10 million divided by the 1.8 million of total sales means that RSV is less than 1% of total sales revenue. It's almost a nothing burger. It doesn't really matter. We don't have to focus on RSV. And you really might argue that you could also say it this way, that 99% of their revenue depends upon their COVID product. They may launch a whole bunch of extra new products, and if each one of those represents individually 1% of their total sales funnel, then it's still basically just a COVID company, right? I mean, that's pure speculation on my part. I have no idea how much future things that they might get approval for might create revenue. I have no idea, but I'm just saying the RSV is not really that important. All right, we're talking revenue, third quarter financial results. Net product sales for third quarter of 2024 reached $1.8 billion, reflecting a 4% year-over-year increase. Okay, and we already saw from that statement from the investor report conference that it's just because it's somewhat due to the earlier approval of the latest booster, and so they were able to start selling it. I think it was 3 weeks earlier than they were able to sell it in 2023. So 4% increase with FDA approval granted 3 weeks earlier than in the previous year. So there you go. There you have it. I remembered right. Okay, so cost of sales for the third quarter 2024 was $514 million, which included third-party royalties of $92 million, inventory write-downs of $214 million, which is really important because a year ago the write-downs were huge, $1.3 billion. This is $0.2 billion. So big difference. And if they start talking about, hey, this year we're doing so much better than we were last year, it's like, yeah, well, you guys had an awful third quarter in 2023 in terms of write-downs and costs. So just to be doing, maybe now you're doing okay, I mean, So like this would be a sentence here. So like compared to the same period in 2023, the cost of sales decreased by 1.7 billion or 77%. Yeah, well, you got to go back and talk about what happened. You got to go back and talk about what happened in the third quarter. You just can't say that out of context. So cost of sales as a percentage of net sales was 28% of the third quarter, down 100. Yeah, I mean, cost of sales incorporates those write-downs. So, I mean, great, it's down 128%. I mean, okay, it sounds amazing, right? But, yeah, I don't know if it's that amazing. Research and development expenses. Research and development expenses for the third quarter of 2024 decreased by 2%. So no big change in R&D expense. This is a bright point, so I put in green. SG&A expenses. This is selling, general, and administrative decreased. So I don't know if that means that they're doing less contracts, or I don't know if they got rid of some people. I mean, it could just simply be that they're producing less vials. But what that means is that on an annualized basis, it's about $1 billion of SG&A spend a year, and they're doing about $4.5 billion in R&D expense a year. So it's a significant part, but most of it is R&D. So again, you do catch it here that there was a huge loss, $3.6 billion lost in third quarter of 2023 compared to a small profit in Q3 of 2024. But that's an important thing to notice, that if you're going to compare quarters from this year and last year, I've already said it, but it is important. So the loss per share a year ago was very bad, much worse than expected. All right. Here, this is important. They anticipate full-year research and development expenses are now anticipated to be in the range of 4.6 to 4.7. Previously, it was 4.8. So it's the same cash burn on R&D, which is most of their expenses. So you could just take that as far as going into the next year. You may be able to trim a little bit on S&G. You're not going to be able to just have these incredible improvements on your losses on inventory write-downs. That's not likely to happen again. And then you're going to continue to have to spend the same amount of money on R&D research. We'll see they purchased a $400 million property in Norwood, Massachusetts. And I think that's the reason why we see an improvement in assets per share. Just saw recently that they have $17 of cash per share. So they're going to add another $5 of cash per. That's neither a positive or a negative statement as far as the health of the company, I would say. Some of the respiratory vaccines, they have a next-gen COVID-19 vaccine, positive phase 3 efficacy. Okay. They shared that back in September, and if my memory serves me right, the shares fell off very bad in that meeting because of the forward guidance that they gave. And so, so it was on earnings, not the September meeting. But you could tell that whenever they announced it in September, it wasn't a big improvement. There's no big improvements in September. Maybe a little bit right here, slight improvement. But for the month, it looks like September was a loss. RSV, we talked about this. Whatever happens, it's a very minimal amount of revenue that's coming in. Seasonal flu and COVID vaccine, so combo. Phase 3 immunogenicity data. So that is RSV announcement, really. Seasonal flu vaccine, they started a phase 3 study. This is interesting. Moderna is on track in 2024, so on track to file, not anything else, just filing, for approval of its next generation COVID-19 vaccine, RSV for high-risk adults. The company expects to communicate the PDUFA date for each of these programs when it's confirmed, Moderna intends to use priority review vouchers for the mRNA 1283, which is the next gen COVID product, and the 1345, the RSV. Well, they already got approval for that. Oh, for high-risk adults, right. Also for its flu COVID combination vaccine. The company intends to file in 2024, subject to the ongoing discussions with the U.S. FDA, and has decided not to use the priority voucher for the flu COVID combo. They did reach an interim milestone in their phase 3 study for cytomegalovirus, and so it'll be interesting to see. They hope to announce that information by the end of 2024, and they have moved into phase 3 for the norovirus vaccine to evaluate its efficacy, safety, and immunogenicity. I'm looking at this, but I also think it's really important just to stick with what the analysts are expecting. Well, the company has already told us that they're not expecting to have any, improvements in their revenue for 2024. And here, this actually came down from 2 weeks ago. I'm looking at the revenue estimates for the full up a little bit, like 500 million. But this used to be at 3.25 billion 2 weeks ago before the earnings announcement. So analysts' average expectations for 2025 revenue has dropped. Has decreased in the last 2 weeks. Okay. And I think the average estimate for 2025 on earnings, about the same. I remember it to be about $8.50 loss expected. They moved it down a little bit worse, down to $8.83 loss. So a little bit worse than what we were looking at during the end of Q2. So, all these, updates on the details of vaccines, it doesn't seem to be moving the target or the needle much as far as what the analysts are expecting and modeling. There was one interesting thing I noted. There's a joint agreement that was entered into with Cerna Healthcare to promote Moderna's mRNA respiratory vaccine portfolio in Taiwan, included the COVID-19 vaccines. And the population of Taiwan is about 23 million people as of April 2023. So I don't know what the uptake would be there. Let's say it's half the people, which would be surprising to me if half the people took it, given some of the things that we know now. But 14, let's say like 12 million people took it. 12 million people on top of the, was it like 350 million Americans? It's not a huge increase in their pool of potential customers by adding in Moderna to Taiwan. It's something, but I just don't think it's a huge something. Just looking at their consolidated statements of operating, so their income statement, you see the cost of sales here is captured in the year-by-year quarterly comparison. They had the $1.3 billion of inventory write-downs in Q3 2023, caused the cost of sales a year ago to be 2,241, and it dropped to 514 here. This 3 months. We could take the 9 months that they give us for all of 2024. We could come down here, look at cost of sales. Cost of sales was $725 for all 3 months, which would put the average spend, let's just say 225, 200. let's just say on average it'd be something like 725 divided by the 3 months would be something like 250 spend per quarter, and in this quarter, cost of sales was 514. So a lot of the cost came in this quarter. Probably had to do with manufacturing, getting ready for the fall and all that. Not a lot of big changes. The SG&A improvement is notable. I think that's a good improvement. Somehow they figured some things out there. But you did have a huge loss, $3.6 billion loss a year ago in that quarter because they dumped all of these write-downs into the cost of sales, which is why we had this huge loss, as I mentioned before, on earnings per share, $9.53 loss. If you're not absorbing all those write-downs in the current quarter, then yeah, you can have surprises. You can have beats to the upside. You can, become profitable even. If you want to save all of your write-downs for an entire year and dump them all on one crappy quarter, then and have a huge loss, and then say have earnings beats on the rest of the quarters, then you can do that. That's what I'm arguing has happened here. If you go over and look at the balance sheet, you're starting to have an inventory build, which is not usually a good thing for manufacturing companies. It's almost over 100% increase in inventory on hand, going from 202 to 412. So related to the cash flow used in operating activities, about the same as a year ago, 3,829 compared to 3,740. Very similar, very, very similar on the uses of cash going to operations. Investing activities dropped. I was thinking a little bit about if they are not able to get as good of interest rates on the cash that they hold. That could be a problem. Proceeds from maturities of marketable securities. These are about the same year over year. Sales of marketable securities. Not a lot of difference from year to year as far as their investing. Financing activities. So no buybacks this year. No buybacks of common stock. Yeah, so I hope that helped learn a little bit about the nominees for these different departments related to the healthcare sector in the United States, a little bit about Americans being 2/3 of the sales that Moderna sells to. The addition of Taiwan, probably no real big deal as far as revenue. I think the bigger points were RSV is not generating that much money. Despite all the pipeline and the chat at this recent Jefferies conference about 10 new products over the next 3 years. Analysts have lowered their revenue targets as well as their earnings targets on average. So take all of them and then find the average. It's lower on revenue, it's lower on earnings. So nobody is that swayed. Something caused the market definitely to go up a bit, and I did kind of expect that to happen. I did describe in the last video that I thought this is either a failed technology that is eventually going to meet its day before the regulators and the scientific scrutiny of a lot of people. There is a really interesting video or a geneticist who works in the cannabis space. His name is Kevin McKernan, McKernan. I believe he writes on Substack, but he was part of the Human Genomics Project, and he also was on a Brett Weinstein podcast called Shots in the Dark. So you could find that, and it's really interesting what they had to say about implications for military service people, as well as something called SV 40, which I guess got me in trouble last time. I can't believe that video is still up, but it's really interesting to hear multiple people talk about problems with the lipid nanoparticle, inflammation, and just all kinds of things. So you could either say if you think it's a potential bankruptcy, or that they're actually going to, under this new administration, develop the political will to call a halt to these things, bring it back to the drawing board, discuss some of these issues that were left out that Kevin McKernan talks about, as far as the missing data that was left out of the original trials when those packets were submitted to the FDA. Very important, sounds like, very critical for the whole technology platform. And why were they left out? He really says some amazing things. So I ran the numbers before. Moderna, even worst case scenario, if they get their products pulled for their COVID shots, they could run on the cash they have through the end of 2025. But there's also, I wasn't able to do that much work in this video on lawsuits, and so that might be something to look at in the future. It's definitely a threat to the company. But I don't see them losing any huge lawsuits, although I don't know. I haven't looked into it. On the other side, if the regulators really continue to say this is fine and this is safe and it passed our protocols and it's done what it's needed to do to get approval in the United States, then, I mean, they launched RSV, and not under an emergency use type of scenario. They put RSV through under the normal, regular, standard procedures, testing, safety protocol, whatever that is. They've proven that they can put these products to market, and that apparently those trials we're still using a lot of the same pieces of the mRNA technology that was used for the COVID shots, the spike vax, and they didn't draw any significant signals or safety signals or problems from the FDA. So in that sense, you'd say, well, now they've like proven they could do it. It's like a proof of concept. They've been able to get that through the regulatory, framework. So if that's going to be allowed, and that they are now like the ones that hold the ability to bring a new vaccine therapy or whatever to market the quickest by using this highly flexible platform, then they're like very well suited for the next novel thing, and which I argued nobody seems to be able to say with confidence that, hey, we know for sure that none of this military gain of function stuff is happening. There's been no great accords. There's been no broad-reaching, robust accords that everybody has agreed to. And even if there was, I mean, that wouldn't be enough to really prove anything to me. You have to have everybody on board, So I just, I think as long as that stuff continues, this thing always has the opportunity of being like worth maybe, I don't know. I think he said like trillions of dollars. Like it could be worth an incredible amount of money if there was another real bad gain of function thing like this that none of our immune systems had ever seen before. This company, I don't know, $800 a share, $1,000 a share. I think that could potentially be reasonable. So anyways, well, thank you for joining me again. I think it's interesting to look at straddles and strangles as potential so again, I just think that, not investing advice or anything, but for me, I think it's interesting to at least look at the options prices for deep out of the money straddles or strangle positions. So, well, anyways, we will see how it goes. I wasn't able to really come up with anything substantial that would suggest like a 15% pop to the upside that we've seen here in like the third week, right before Thanksgiving. So I can't say that I really think that it's going to continue to break upward to the upside, and I think it could very easily be. I think BioNTech is trading below their cash per share, so that's what I think is going to happen. I don't know. You guys decide what you think is going to happen. Thanks for joining me. Love to hear what you'd have to say. Otherwise, related to our portfolio management material, I think for $2 a month, it's $2 a month. We provide a quarterly portfolio optimization tool that uses Excel and teach you. I basically like put the numbers together, but then show you how to run the tools in Excel to, get what you're looking for. What else? We have a full course on that as well. Something that they teach in the graduate school level for, it's called Modern Portfolio Theory, and won a Nobel Prize. You can look it up, but yeah, it's great to have a theory out there. It's another thing to know how to pick your stocks, move from your stock prices to your returns, and then do the things that you need to do to kind of do the benefit risk analysis, especially on the risk side of things, to see not just how much does a single stock move up and down, but how are things correlated with one another, right? And you're trying to find things that are non-correlated or negatively correlated. Otherwise, keep an eye on the M2 money supply. I think that I'm not sure, but it seems to me that has a large effect on asset prices. So currently, it's increasing. It has been for a couple months now. So, okay, well, talk to you guys next time. Thanks, bye.